High Admiral Vex Cthulhu clicked his mandibles in what could only be described as cosmic frustration. The war room aboard the Galactic Council's flagship, Harmony's Edge, buzzed with the nervous energy of 12 different species, all united in one simple emotion: absolute terror. So, let me get this straight. Vex Cthulhu's voice carried the weight of someone who'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. The Skorrath Dominion has conquered 47 systems in 3 months. Our combined fleets have been reduced to space debris. And our best military strategists are suggesting what was the phrase? Run screaming to the galactic rim. Commander Lysa 9, a tall, blue-skinned Zerathian with 4 arms that she currently had crossed in various configurations of annoyance, bobbed her elongated head. The situation is less than optimal, Admiral. Less than optimal? Vex Cthulhu's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Commander, when your enemy turns entire star systems into parking lots for their war machines, less than optimal doesn't quite cover it. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the Skorrath advance in all its terrifying glory. Red markers swept across star charts like a plague, consuming everything in their path. The Skorrath weren't just conquerors. They were exterminators. Where they passed, nothing but asteroid fields remained. Perhaps, interrupted a voice from the shadows, we should consider alternative options. All eyes turned to Intelligence Director Raysmore Kith, a species whose name translated roughly to the ones who whisper secrets in the dark. Just one thing before we begin. YouTube tells me 94.3% of you watching aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free. It really supports the channel, and you'll get more amazing HFY sci-fi stories delivered straight to you. Don't miss out. His gray, elongated form seemed to absorb light, and when he spoke, others tended to listen, mostly because they feared what he might know about them. Alternative options. Vex Cthulhu's tone suggested he was already regretting asking. Raysmore Kith stepped into the light, his black eyes reflecting the star charts. There are uncontacted species, civilizations that have remained outside Council jurisdiction. Perhaps one of them might possess capabilities we lack. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Council had spent millennia being the most advanced, most civilized collection of species in the galaxy. Asking for help from primitives was like admitting your stellar cruiser couldn't outrun a solar flare. You're suggesting we ask barbarians for help? Commander Lysa 9's 4 arms now gestured in what could only be interpreted as profound skepticism. I'm suggesting, Raysmore Kith continued with the patience of someone explaining hyperspace physics to a child, that conventional wisdom has failed us spectacularly. The Skorrath have technology that makes our finest warships look like toys. Perhaps unconventional wisdom might serve us better. Vex Cthulhu studied the Intelligence Director with the look of someone weighing his options between certain death and probable humiliation. What did you have in mind? Sol 3, Raysmore Kith said simply. The silence that followed could have powered a small space station. Sol 3? Lysa 9's voice climbed several octaves. The mud ball with the bipedal primates? The ones who still use chemical propulsion and can't even maintain peace on a single planet. The very same. Raysmore Kith's expression remained neutral, which in his species was practically equivalent to maniacal grinning. Chief Science Officer Tal Werix, a being that resembled a walking tree with attitude problems, rustled his bark-like skin in what passed for laughter among his kind. Oh, yes, let's ask the species that invented warfare as recreation to help us with our little military problem. What could possibly go wrong? They call themselves humans, Morkith continued, ignoring the sarcasm dripping from every voice in the room. And according to our long-range observations, they have a rather unique approach to conflict resolution. Unique how? Vex Cthulhu asked, though his tone suggested he already regretted the question. They appear to consider impossible odds a personal challenge, rather than a reason to surrender. The war room erupted in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and what could generously be called alien profanity. When the noise died down, Vex Cthulhu fixed the intelligence director with a stare that could have melted hull plating. Let me understand this correctly. Our solution to facing an unstoppable enemy is to recruit a species of Deathworld primitives who haven't figured out faster-than-light travel. In essence, yes. And you believe these, humans, can succeed where the combined military might of 200 civilizations has failed? I believe, Morkith said, with the tone of someone playing his final card, that we are about to be extinct in approximately 6 months if we continue our current strategy. What do we have to lose? The question hung in the air like a photon torpedo with a faulty timer. After what felt like several geological epochs, Vex Cthulhu sighed, a sound that managed to convey the weight of responsibility, the certainty of doom, and the faint hope that somewhere in the universe someone had a sense of humor about these things. Fine. Send a diplomatic vessel to Sol 3. But I want minimal contact protocols. We assess their capabilities, make our request, and hope they're too primitive to realize we're essentially asking them to commit species suicide on our behalf. Already done, Admiral, Morkith replied smoothly. Ambassador Quinn Darvel departed 3 days ago. The room fell silent again, this time with the special kind of quiet that follows the realization that your fate is already in motion, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Meanwhile, approximately 47 light-years away, Ambassador Quinn Darvel was having what he would later describe as the most educational experience of his diplomatic career, assuming he survived to describe anything at all. The human who called himself General Marcus Kane sat across from him in what appeared to be a primitive command center, surrounded by screens displaying information in a visual format that suggested these beings had never heard of direct neural interface. The human was drinking a dark liquid from a ceramic container and studying the holographic display Quinn Darvel had provided with an expression that was difficult to interpret. "So," General Kane said after what felt like an eternity, "you're telling me that there's an empire of genocidal aliens sweeping across the galaxy, wiping out entire civilizations, and your response is to come here and ask the species that just figured out how to split atoms for help?" Quinn Darvel's tentacles shifted in what he hoped conveyed diplomatic enthusiasm rather than nervous terror. "Your species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability in combat situations." Adaptability. Kane's tone was dry enough to power a desert reclamation project. That's one way to put it. He leaned back in his chair, a piece of furniture that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd heard chairs described but never actually seen one. "Tell me about these Skorrath. They are formidable?" Quinn Darvel accessed his databanks, projecting images into the air between them. Standing approximately 3 meters tall, with exoskeletons capable of withstanding direct energy weapon strikes, their technology is approximately 800 years ahead of standard Council capabilities. They possess weapons that can crack planets, shields that can deflect stellar-class weaponry, and a complete disregard for what we consider the basic principles of civilized warfare. Kane studied the images with the attention of someone examining a particularly interesting insect, What do you mean by basic principles of civilized warfare? Well, Quindarvel's voice took on the tone of someone explaining something so obvious it hurt. You negotiate. You establish rules of engagement. You minimize civilian casualties. You preserve cultural artifacts. You accept surrender when offered. And the Skorrath? They don't. Kane nodded slowly. They just kill everyone. Everyone and everything. They strip mine planets for resources and move on. No prisoners, no negotiations, no mercy. The human was quiet for several moments, and Quindarvel found himself studying this primitive being with growing confusion. Kane appeared to be smiling. "General," Quindarvel ventured, "did I say something amusing?" "Oh no, Ambassador. You said something wonderful." Kane stood up and walked to a wall covered with what appeared to be primitive paper maps marked with colored symbols. "You see, you came here thinking you were asking primitives for help with your advanced military problem. And we are not?" Kane turned around, and the expression on his face made Quindarvel suddenly understand why this species had never been conquered by its own predators. "Ambassador, you just described every war my species has ever fought. Overwhelming odds. Check technically superior enemy. Check no mercy expected or given. Check the only difference is, when we fight wars like this, we call it Tuesday." The human pressed a button on his primitive communications device. "Get me General Torres, Admiral Reeves, and Colonel Park. Full staff meeting in 1 hour." He turned back to Quindarvel. "Ambassador, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need completely honest answers. Can you do that?" "Of course." "How many humans would you need?" The question was so unexpected that Quindarvel's translator nearly overloaded. Excuse me. For this war against the Skorrath? How many humans do you think you'd need to solve your problem?" Quindarvel's tentacles writhed in confusion. "General, I think there may be a misunderstanding. We're not asking you to solve our problem. We're asking if you might be able to assist our forces in some small way." Kane's smile widened. "Ambassador, my species has a saying, go big or go home. Since home is about to be invaded by genocidal aliens, I'd say going big is our only option." But your technology will improve rapidly once we have examples of what we're fighting against. How long do we have? The Skorrath will reach the Outer Council worlds in approximately 6 months. 6 months? Kane nodded thoughtfully. That should be enough time. Enough time for what? To mobilize Earth's entire military force, retrofit every ship we can build or steal with whatever technology you can share, and figure out how to kill things that think they can't be killed. Quindarvel stared at the human in what could only be described as mounting horror. "General, you're talking about committing your entire species to a war that has already destroyed civilizations with thousands of years of military experience." "Yep. Against an enemy with technology so advanced it might as well be magic." "Sounds about right. With no guarantee of success, no hope of mercy if you fail, and no possibility of retreat." Kane's grin was now wide enough to be visible from orbit. "Ambassador, you just described the human condition. We've been fighting impossible wars against ridiculous odds for our entire existence. The only difference is, this time, we get to do it in space." He walked over to a primitive viewing port and gestured at the star-filled void beyond. "Besides, it occurs to me that your council has been looking at this problem all wrong." "How so?" "You keep thinking about this as a military problem. Advanced technology against advanced technology. Civilization against civilization. Kane turned back to face him. But that's not what this is. Then what is it? This, Kane said with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a puzzle everyone else thought was impossible, is pest control. And Ambassador, you just hired the universe's most experienced exterminators. The communications device on Kane's desk began to chime with incoming calls. Within minutes, the room was filled with humans in various military uniforms, all speaking in rapid, clipped tones about mobilization schedules, resource allocation, and something called Project Overkill. Quindarvel sat in the corner, his diplomatic training completely failing to prepare him for what he was witnessing. He had come to Sol 3 hoping to recruit a few primitive allies to supplement the Council's failing military efforts. Instead, he appeared to have awakened something that made the Skorrath look like a minor nuisance. As he listened to the humans discuss their plans, which seemed to involve converting their entire industrial base to war production in a matter of weeks, one terrifying thought kept echoing through his mind. What had they done? And somewhere in the dark between the stars, Admiral Skorrath was about to find out. 3 months later, Admiral Skorrath stood in the command center of his flagship. Inevitable conquest, watching his advanced scouts return with reports that made absolutely no sense. "Explain to me again," he said, in the grinding metallic voice that had become the last sound heard by billions across 47 star systems, "why our forward elements are reporting. What did they call it?" His subordinate, war leader Grix Tormel, shifted his massive exoskeleton nervously. When creatures designed for pure warfare started showing signs of anxiety, smart beings paid attention. "They called it aggressive expansion of defensive positions, my Admiral." "And what does that mean in terms that don't require a linguistics degree?" "The primitives from Sol 3. They appear to be building fortifications." Skorrath's laugh was the sound of metal being shredded by plasma cutters. "Fortifications? Against us? The species that turns planets into asteroid fields is worried about primitive defensive positions?" "Well," Grix Tormel's voice carried the particular tone of someone about to deliver news that would probably result in his immediate vaporization. "They're not exactly conventional fortifications." The main display activated, showing long-range reconnaissance images. What Skorrath saw defied every principle of military engineering he'd learned in 3 centuries of conquest. "Are those—" He paused, trying to process what his sensors were telling him. "Are those humans building weapons platforms inside asteroids?" "Yes, Admiral. Approximately 47,000 of them, scattered throughout the Outer Council territories." 47,000 hidden weapons platforms. Skorrath's tone was the verbal equivalent of watching a supernova from too close. "And our intelligence division didn't think this was worth mentioning until now because they're not just weapons platforms, Admiral. According to our analysis, each asteroid has been completely hollowed out and filled with, well, we're not entirely sure. I'm waiting. Our best guess is that they've turned each asteroid into a mobile shipyard, weapon factory, and fortress, all at the same time. The silence that followed was so complete, it seemed to have its own gravitational field. Mobile. Shipyards. Skorrath's voice had dropped to the level usually reserved for announcing the heat death of the universe. Each one appears capable of producing approximately 50 ships per standard time unit. The humans seem to have automated the entire process. 50 ships per... The Admiral's voice trailed off as the mathematics hit him like a relativistic projectile. Grix Tormel, if there are 47,000 production facilities, each building 50 ships per time unit? Yes, Admiral. They appear to be producing approximately 2.3 million warships per standard time unit. 2.3 million. The Admiral's massive frame stood perfectly still. Per time unit. The rate is accelerating, Admiral. Accelerating. Our latest reconnaissance suggests they've improved their production efficiency by approximately 300% in the last month alone. Skorrath turned to stare at his subordinate with eyes that had watched civilizations burn. War leader, in our entire history of conquest, what is the largest fleet we have ever assembled? Approximately 50,000 vessels, Admiral, for the siege of the Skorrath Empire. And we considered that overwhelming force. Yes, Admiral. And these humans are producing more ships in a single day than we've built in our entire existence. That appears to be accurate, Admiral. The command center had gone so quiet that the hum of life support systems sounded like a thunderstorm. Finally, Skorrath spoke in a voice that carried the weight of dawning realization. Show me their ship designs. The display shifted, and suddenly the command center was filled with images that challenged every assumption about primitive warfare. The human ships looked nothing like the elegant, efficient designs favored by advanced civilizations. They looked like someone had taken the concept of spaceship and run it through a device specifically designed to offend aesthetic sensibilities. They appear to favor... Grix Tormel paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. Function over form. The vessels were angular, brutal things covered in weapon ports, armor plating, and what appeared to be additional weapon ports mounted on the weapon ports. They looked less like ships and more like flying weapons factories that had developed a severe attitude problem. Analysis of their combat capabilities? Skorrath asked, though his tone suggested he was already regretting the question. Unknown, Admiral. They haven't engaged in any combat operations yet. What do you mean, unknown? Every time our scouts approach their positions, the humans withdraw. They retreat? Not exactly retreat, Admiral. More like strategic repositioning. They pull back, and our forces advance into empty space. Empty space? Well, apparently, empty space. Skorrath's exoskeleton made grinding sounds as his stress levels reached critical thresholds. War leader, please tell me you're not about to inform me that apparently empty space is somehow worse than obviously occupied space. Our advanced forces report anomalies. What kind of anomalies? Ships disappearing, Admiral. The temperature in the command center seemed to drop several degrees. Disappearing how? They simply stop existing. No wreckage, no energy signatures, no distress signals. One moment they're there, the next moment they're not. How many ships? Approximately 4,000, Admiral. 4,000 ships have simply vanished without a trace. Skorrath stared at the tactical display with the expression of someone who had just realized he might have made a significant error in judgment. And our response? We've designated the affected areas as navigational hazards and routed our forces around them. We're avoiding areas of space because they make our ships disappear. Yes, Admiral. And the humans? They appear to be expanding these areas. The Admiral's voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper. How fast are they expanding? Approximately 1 star system per day, Admiral. For the first time in his 3-century career of systematic genocide, Admiral Skorrath Empire experienced something his species had no word for: doubt. Get me a direct communication channel to the human command structure. Admiral? You heard me, War Leader. I want to talk to whoever is in charge of this situation. 20 minutes later, the main display activated to show the face of General Marcus Kane, looking remarkably relaxed for someone whose species was supposedly facing extinction. Admiral Skorrath Empire, I presume? Kane's voice carried the tone of someone greeting an old friend rather than a genocidal warlord. I was wondering when you'd call. You were expecting this communication? Well, according to our projections, you should be getting curious right about now. Your advance forces have been probing our defensive positions for 6 weeks. Most species start asking questions after losing about 4,000 ships to unknown causes. You've been monitoring our losses? Kane's smile was the sort that made smart beings start looking for exits. Admiral, we've been monitoring everything. Your fleet movements, your supply lines, your communication frequencies, your commander's personal habits. Did you know War Leader Grix Tormel has a collection of rare crystalline formations from conquered worlds? Fascinating hobby. Skorrath Empire felt something that might have been ice forming in his primary circulatory system. You've infiltrated our command structure. Infiltrated is such an ugly word. We prefer comprehensive tactical assessment. But yes, we know where every one of your ships is, what they're carrying, and where they're going. Impossible. Our security protocols are designed to prevent other advanced civilizations from accessing your systems. Unfortunately for you, we're not an advanced civilization. Kane leaned back in his chair with the satisfaction of someone explaining a particularly clever magic trick. We're barely past the Stone Age, remember? So instead of trying to hack your quantum-encrypted networks, we just built better sensors. Better sensors? Admiral, when your entire species has spent millennia perfecting ways to kill things that don't want to die, you get really good at finding things that don't want to be found. The implications of this statement settled over Skorrath Empire like a collapsing star. The disappearing ships. Ah, yes, you've been wondering about that. Kane gestured to someone off-screen. Admiral Reeves, would you like to explain our new defensive strategy? A new human appeared on the display, wearing what appeared to be a different style of uniform. Admiral Skorrath Empire, I'm Admiral Sarah Reeves, commanding the Sol Defense Fleet. Your ships aren't disappearing. They're being disassembled. Disassembled? Taken apart, piece by piece. We've deployed approximately 12,000 automated salvage platforms throughout our defensive perimeter. When your ships enter designated areas, the platforms strip them down for raw materials. Raw materials for what? More ships, of course. We'd like to thank you for the donations, by the way. Skorrath hull alloys are remarkably efficient. Skorrath Empire's voice, when he could finally form words, sounded like a star going supernova. You're recycling our ships? Waste not, want not, Kane interjected cheerfully. Besides, your technology is about 800 years ahead of ours. Every ship you send us gets us closer to technological parity. How close? Oh, we achieved parity last Tuesday. We're currently working on technological superiority. The command center of the inevitable conquest had gone so silent that individual heartbeats could be heard across species barriers. When Skorrath Empire finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of civilizations. What do you want? Kane's expression shifted, and suddenly the relaxed demeanor was replaced by something that made the Admiral understand why this species had never been successfully conquered by anything, including each other. Admiral, for the past 3 months, you've been operating under the assumption that you're dealing with a primitive species that got lucky. That assumption is about to prove problematic. Explain. You've been fighting a defensive war. We've been studying you, learning your tactics, your technology, your psychology, building weapons specifically, designed to kill things like you. And now, Kane paused for effect. We're ready to go on the offensive. You're threatening us? Admiral, we're not threatening you. We're informing you. Kane stood up, and the camera angle shifted to show a massive display behind him covered in star charts. Red markers showed Skorrath positions. Blue markers showed human forces. There were a lot more blue markers than red ones. As of this moment, human forces have achieved tactical superiority in 73% of contested space. We have production capabilities that exceed yours by a factor of approximately 40,000 to 1. And we have something you've never encountered before. Which is, Kane's smile was the last thing that many species across the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral, you've spent centuries conquering civilizations that fought you the way civilized beings fight wars. With honor, with rules, with some concept of proportionate response. He leaned forward until his face filled the screen. We're not civilized beings, Admiral. We're humans, and we don't fight wars. We solve problems. Your problem is that you exist. Our solution is simple. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Skorrath Empire staring at a blank screen in the sudden, terrible understanding of what his species had awakened. War leader, he said, in a voice barely above a whisper. Recall all forces. Full retreat to the home system. Admiral? Now, war leader. Before the proximity alarms began screaming. Admiral! The sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. Massive fleet movement detected. Human ships they're everywhere. The tactical display activated, showing space filled with more ships than the Skorrath had ever imagined possible. Not thousands, not tens of thousands, millions of human vessels appearing simultaneously across dozens of star systems, moving with the coordinated precision of a species that had turned warfare into a science. Admiral, Grix Tormel's voice held the tone of someone watching his entire worldview collapse. They're not attacking our military targets. What are they attacking? Everything else. Supply depots, communication arrays, industrial facilities, civilian transport networks. They're dismantling our entire civilization. Skorrath Empire watched the tactical display in horrified fascination as human forces swept across Skorrath space like a plague designed by engineers. They weren't conquering, they were deconstructing. Every Skorrath installation, every ship, every trace of their presence was being methodically erased from the galaxy. How long? He asked. At current rate of advance? Approximately 72 hours until they reach the home system. And our chances of successful resistance? Grix Tormel's silence was answer enough. Admiral Skorrath Empire stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the end of his species' 1,000-year reign of terror, and finally understood what Ambassador Quindarvel had unleashed upon the galaxy. The humans hadn't just answered the Council's call for help. They had solved the Skorrath problem permanently, efficiently, and with the kind of overwhelming force that made genocide look like a minor disagreement. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, General Marcus Kane was probably still smiling.